Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We were giving a couple of extra minutes for additional people to join us. So we have a good crowd now. We have about 42 of you, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Michelle Clark-Jenkins. I'm the Director of Methodology and Research for Griffin and Strong. Joining me today is Cordelia Troublefield, who is the Project Manager for the Gwinnett County Disparity Study. So welcome everyone again. We'll go ahead and get started with this informational meeting about the disparity study. A couple of housekeeping things. First, please hold your questions until the end. We will be having a Q&A at the very end of the presentation. If it would be helpful if you muted yourself just so any outside noise doesn't kind of come in. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Please use the chat room if you have questions. If you want to leave your information in there, that would be great too. So if we'll go ahead and get started, next slide, please. Today I'll be talking a little bit about our firm, so you get familiar with us, and then the objective and the purpose of the study. I'll talk about how we conduct the study and how you can be involved, the timeline, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Next slide, please. So our firm is Griffin and Strong. We are a law and public policy consulting firm. Our consulting division only does disparity research. That's all that we do. We've been doing this work for 35 years. I've been with the firm almost 17 years. I've conducted over 60 disparity studies. And then our team has 7 attorneys, 2 PhDs in economics, a PhD in social psychology, and a PhD in anthropology. And again, we're located right here in the Atlanta area. Next slide, please. So our project executive, Rodney Strong, was the former director of contract compliance for the city of Atlanta. He was the project manager on the first major municipal post-Croson study that happened in just 1989. He is the principal architect of the city of Atlanta's EBO program that became the model really for the nation. And he's been an expert witness in 2 cases. All of that will become clear why that's important in a minute. Our principal investigator, Dr. has conducted over 200 studies, and he has been an expert witness in 6 cases. Our senior economist, Dr. Gregory Price, has 25 years of experience in economic analysis, particularly in this area of disparities of employment and private sector contracting, lending, and public contracting. And he was recently named one of the top 40 Black economists of the last 30 years. So your study is in good hands. Next slide, please. So the objective and purpose of our study. The objective is to determine whether there is the existence of discrimination and barriers for minority and women-owned businesses, disadvantaged businesses, persons with disability business enterprises, small businesses, veteran-owned businesses, or LGBTQ businesses. Those are our study groups, so occasionally I'll be referring to them as study groups rather than having to recite all those groups again. So why do we do disparity studies? In 1989, there was a case, J. Croson versus City of Richmond, Virginia. It was the first time and one of the last times that the Supreme Court has spoken on this issue. Some of you are familiar with probably with the more recent case, Students for Fair Admission, that was not about public contracting, although of course it could ultimately affect public contracting. This is really one of the last cases, this and the one right after it, Adirondack Constructors versus Pena, when the Supreme Court spoke on this issue. And what it really said was, we are not relying on societal kind of an overview or a general understanding of societal discrimination when it comes to race and gender-based programs. And actually with Croson, it was only race-based programs. With Pena, it then added in gender-based programs. That in essence, we have to prove the existence of discrimination. It wasn't sufficient just to say there's been societal discrimination, because otherwise the court said you would run afoul of the 14th Amendment, where everyone has to be kind of treated equally. So when they're not, and you have a preference program, even if it's remedial in nature, you still have to jump over a pretty high bar, which is judicial scrutiny, which in this case is strict scrutiny, which is the highest level of judicial scrutiny if you're going to have a race-based program, and intermediate scrutiny if it's a gender-based program. I want to differentiate that, because if you do programs that are not based on race and gender, so for example, veteran programs, persons with disabilities, anything, small business programs, those have a very low bar, which is a rational basis test. In other words, you just really have to have a good reason why you're having it. So for example, you could have a preference program for veterans based on the fact that you want to benefit them because of their service to the country. And that is just a rational basis test. You don't have to have a full disparity study, because you're not really looking at whether there's been discrimination based on race or gender. So what the court said is, if you're going to do anything that's in essence race or gender based, you have to have a factual basis and evidence. You have to have done what is in essence a disparity study, which is the factual basis and evidence that demonstrates that you can make some sort of an inference of discrimination based on the evidence. The other thing the court said was that whatever you do as a result of that factual basis, so whatever recommendations or implementation that happens out of this study has to be based on the findings of the study. It has to be narrowly tailored to the findings of the study, so that it is not overly inclusive or under-inclusive. It also said that we have to first look at race and gender neutral remedies for whatever disparities we find. All of that is wrapped up in us having to follow a methodology that's really been dictated by case law. So this Croson case that was in 1989 told us what we had to do, but it really didn't tell us how to do it. So there have been a lot of Circuit Court of Appeal cases since then that have tried to really tell us how to do this. The court likes this or they don't like that. And so these cases over a period of time have dictated how we do these disparity studies. And I will tell you, as long as I've been doing them, that sometimes the methodology seems a little counterintuitive, but it's because this is what the courts have accepted. Next slide, please. So our methodology and our technical approach begins with a legal analysis. All of these things, these boxes you see here, which I'll talk a little bit more about each one of them in this presentation. But this is why a disparity study takes at least a year to complete, because of all of these steps that we have to do a legal analysis. Again, disparity studies are a creation of the court, so we have to make sure we're abiding by any recent decisions of the court, whether they be a Supreme Court decision or whether they be district courts, even district courts or courts of appeals. We do a deep dive into policy. We look at data is a big portion of this. Oh, Christian Perez is on with us. I hadn't seen you, Christian, there. Christian is our data analyst. So one of the things he has to do is gather up all of this data, which is at least 5 years worth of data, including like every payment made to a vendor. And that data has to be cleaned and utilized. And that's really his job. And so then the first big analysis we're going to do is relevant market. We also will do a private sector analysis, and then we do a utilization and availability analysis that really becomes a comparison of, and that becomes our disparity analysis.
Like at your appointment. Actually, let me know what they say.
So this is kind of the big picture. I'm going to talk about each one of these a little bit more individually. Okay, next slide. So the first big piece was the policy review. And we look at that for a couple of reasons. One is in order to be able to make recommendations about maybe what the county could be doing differently, we have to know what the county's already doing. So there is a chapter in our study that talks about what the current procurement policies are of the county. And not just in regards to these study groups, but in general, because we want to see, are there any written policies that the county has that may be a barrier to businesses doing business with it, particularly our study groups. And again, we don't look at just our study groups. Honestly, we are looking at all of the procurement processes because we want to see if there could be that there are barriers to small businesses and not just the rest of the study. We want to know if the policies as they're written are understood by staff. We also want to know if the policies, if there are any discrepancies between the written policies and the practices. And then ultimately, whether any of those policies can be modified to promote inclusion. Next slide. So the first quantitative analysis that we do really is the relevant market analysis. And that's taking payment data and determining where the firms are located, where this county is spending at least 75% of its dollars. So we're not determining this geographic market area. The county is determining it by where it's already doing business. So what we're trying to do is to define the county's economic marketplace. And we borrow that from antitrust law, where antitrust says that your economic marketplace is somewhere between 75 and 85% of where you're already doing business. And so that's what we're looking at. And that's important because we have to figure out, you know, who are the firms that we're studying as part of the study. It's not going to be every firm in the country. So where are those firms located? And it's in that economic marketplace where the county's already doing business. So for example, if we look at all payments made to vendors and we identify those vendors and we say, okay, what percentage of all the dollars spent by the county are spent with firms just who are located, have a location in Gwinnett County? Let's say that's 60%. Well, then we have to go out further. And we may then look at the counties surrounding Gwinnett County. And maybe we get to another threshold. Maybe that's 75 or 80%. So that's what we're trying to get to. And then once we establish that relevant market area, then only firms located in that area will be part of our analysis. And part of that is you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, which is firms within that relevant market, what firms were utilized, and what's the availability. And I'll explain what those two things are next. Next slide, please. So the first analysis that Christian will be undertaking is the utilization analysis. And again, that's taking all payments over a 5-year period made to them and determining and disaggregating that data by year. And that's why we look at 5 years so that it shows us trends. So it's not just, well, the year we picked is just some sort of an anomaly. It lets us see 5 years worth of data. So we split it out by each year of that spend. We also disaggregated by each ethnicity and gender group. So you'll see the numbers for African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, and then we have a separate category for non-minority women. And then there's a group called non-MWBEs, which could be non-minority male-owned firms. It could be publicly held corporations, or it could be uncertified minority and women-owned firms who never certified. And the only way we can count you as a minority or woman, or actually any of our study groups, so whether you're a veteran or a small business, is if you are certified as that, because there's no way for us to know what you actually are if you're owned and controlled unless you're certified. And we do measure both prime and subcontractors. So we do look at direct payments, firms who have direct awards with the county. And then we also do a separate analysis of those who are subcontracted by those primes. We also do a threshold analysis. The threshold analysis really looks at, are there disparities at all levels? There are sometimes some criticism of disparity studies because our analysis is of all dollars and all firms in various categories. And so there's this question of, well, here's this guy who has a truck and he can't do, and you count him as available for construction work, but he can't do a $5 million contract. And that may or may not be true, but the county is not only doing $5 million contracts. As a matter of fact, and again, we haven't gotten this far in this study, but in the studies we've done, most counties and municipal governments probably have more awards under 100,000 than they have anyplace else, where clearly capacity is not an issue. So those firms are counted, but we do kind of a different slice of the apple. So we look at all awards, then we take out the ones over $1 million and look at only awards under $1 million to see if there are still disparities. And then we also look at under $500,000, where again, capacity isn't an issue. This also helps us to identify where there are opportunities for small businesses. Next slide. And so then we look at availability. So now we know, we look at percentages, the percentages of dollars that went to firms in various of our study groups. And then we want to say, who are the ready, willing, and able firms? Who are the firms who could perform this work? What are those percentages look like? And we really have fairly broad analysis there. If a firm is located in the relevant market, if they provide the types of services that the county is purchasing, so they fall into one of 5 categories: construction-related professional services called A&E, that's architects, engineering, surveying, construction managers; professional services, which are doctors, lawyers, people who fall into any medical or financial services; other services, which is every other services, marketing, IT, lawn service, janitorial work, anything that falls in those categories. And then the last category is goods, which is anything that's tangible. So if you fall into one of those categories, you're located in the relevant market, and you have at least expressed interest in doing business with government by being registered, certified, you've bid, you've been awarded a contract, you've done something that has come to try to do business with government, then you're going to be counted in our availability list. And we're not just looking at the county's data, which we'll be looking, including in availability, their vendors, their subcontractors, their awardees, payees, and bidders. We'll also look at, and certified lists. We'll be looking at certified lists, City of Atlanta, Fulton County, any of the surrounding jurisdictions and the state that have vendor or certified list. We'll pull all those in as well. And then we'll also perform a separate analysis using Dun & Bradstreet. Dun & Bradstreet professes to be kind of the all-inclusive repository of businesses throughout the country. And so we'll go to that source as well and do a separate analysis of just Dun & Bradstreet. One of the problems with Dun & Bradstreet, which is why it's really not our favorite way to conduct an analysis of availability, although the courts have accepted it, is because many times it undercounts minority and women-owned firms, and it also will tend to undercount small businesses who are not in Dun & Bradstreet. But we'll do it both ways and then compare both analysis. Next slide, please. So then all of that is to then compare the two, utilization and availability, and determine if there's a disparity. So if 10%, once we've established a relevant market, if 10% of all of the engineering firms in our relevant market are African-American owned, are African-American owned engineering firms getting 10% of the dollars? So if they're 10% of the available firms, are they getting 10% of those dollars? And if they're not, we have a disparity. So we have to test that disparity to see if it's statistically significant. If you had 10% utilization or 10% availability compared to 9% utilization, that's probably not going to be statistically significant. But if it's 10% availability compared to 2% utilization, that's going to be a statistically significant disparity. And then there's one more test we have to perform. You see that there's disparity, but what is the likely cause of that disparity? So one of the things we do is we test it through what's called a regression analysis. It basically kind of equalizing all of these factors with race and gender neutral characteristics. So things like, is there a disparity because there's a size differential? The education of the owner, how many employees they have, those kinds of race neutral differences between firms. We equalize those. And once we've done that, is there still a disparity? If there is, then the court allows us to make, and this is a term of art, an inference of discrimination. It says that the disparity is not likely caused by race and gender neutral factors, that it is likely caused by the race and gender of the owner. And again, that's our test for discrimination, but we're also looking at all these race and gender neutral groups, small businesses, LGBTQ. So again, we're looking more at whether there's a disparity so that the county can look at every year, be able to look at where should we be, even though we may not looking at discriminatory factors. So with veterans, for example, let's say veterans are 10% and the county's only been spending 2%. It will know that it needs to do more outreach and it needs to increase its outreach to those groups. Next slide, please. So a totally separate analysis we do is a private sector analysis, which is a bit of a misnomer. It actually is a marketplace disparities analysis. And what it does is look at the marketplace outside of Gwinnett County. So we're no longer looking at what are they doing. We want to see what's happening in the marketplace. And this is important because if this had been circa, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, maybe 1980s, even maybe 1990s, you might have seen 0 Hispanic American owned construction firms and 0 were used. Therefore, when you do a disparity analysis, you say no discrimination. Well, we've got to look at the private sector because that's the feeder for available firms to Gwinnett County. So if there's discrimination in the marketplace, we have to look at things like what's the likelihood of self-employment for these various study groups. We look at the construction market disparities by looking at building permit data, because in your marketplace, building permit data tells you who's getting all of the private sector or even other government awards for doing construction work. And so what percentage of those who are applying for building permits are part of our study groups? And then the last thing we want to look at is credit markets. Is there discrimination in credit markets? Because if there is, that's going to be very difficult for firms in our study groups to be able to start and grow their businesses. Next slide, please. So this slide is where all of you come in, starting with today and last night when we did an in-person informational meeting, is that's community engagement and anecdotal evidence. This is critical to the outcome of our study. So I'm thanking again all of you for turning out today and being a part of this meeting. And we hope that you will walk alongside us over this next year while we continue to have community engagement. The reason this is so critical is because whatever we find out in this study statistically, we won't know what to do with it unless we talk to you. So we make recommendations. So we have our findings from our study, and then we make recommendations. And our recommendations really come from 3 areas. One is our understanding of best practices. We've done this work again for 35 years all over the country. So it's our understanding of what are the best practices of what's working, what kind of programs, what innovations are people doing, how are they getting results, that kind of understanding. We also, that that policy analysis we do, that deep dive, that's going to help us to understand maybe what recommendations we get. But the biggest part of our recommendations come from what you tell us. And so we will reach out to you in a number of different ways. This informational meeting, when I've finished my presentation, you all will ask your questions, but also some of you may give us some comments or tell us about some of your experiences during this meeting. We do randomly selected anecdotal interviews, which are really kind of like case studies of talking to you and saying, what kind of business do you have? And getting a much deeper understanding of your business and your experiences doing business, attempting to do business, or if you haven't even attempted to do business with Gwinnett County, why not? We do focus groups, putting firms in a room together and listening to that dialogue. We do a survey, and you all, because you're here today, will get a copy of that survey to fill out. Take you about 10-15 minutes. Please do it. It helps us to quantify a lot of areas and be able to say, well, certain percentage of our survey respondents said this, a certain percentage said that. That's really very important to quantify responses. We will have public hearings in probably about 6 months where you all will tell us again about your experiences. We try to partner with civic and trade and organizations and social organizations as well to get feedback from them about their membership, but also to get them to get their membership out. Because as I told you, our availability is based on firms who've at least expressed interest in doing business with government. But we need to reach out to firms who haven't even registered to do business with government to find out why they haven't. What have been their barriers? Why haven't you registered? Why haven't you certified? What are those barriers? And again, it becomes a little bit of a needs assessment of what do firms need in order to begin to do business with Gwinnett County. I mean, the end goal of this and the benefit to the county is to increase competition, and as well as to increase equity and inclusion in its procurement processes. And then we also do take emails. At the end of this, you'll see our dedicated email address. If you're not someone who wants to talk in public or any of our meetings, or you don't get called on to do an interview, you can always email us your story, and that gets included in our study. None of this information is identified by name. Even if you've spoken at a public hearing, when we write up our report, we don't put your name in there. With the ones that are a little closed, you have a little more anonymity. Obviously, at a public meeting, that's kind of difficult to do. And we do post the public hearings on our website. The recordings from this meeting will be also posted on our website. So very important, stay with us over this year, partner with us, walk with us, talk to us, tell us your experiences. And some people think, well, I haven't done business with Gwinnett County. You're probably more critical to us than some of the people who have done business, because you're telling us why you're not. What are those barriers? What's keeping you from either being successful in getting an award, or why haven't you even tried to do that? Next slide, please. So ultimately, we'll submit our findings, and then we'll make our recommendations. Again, I've told you what our recommendations are based on. Under CROSN, we are required to first review race and gender neutral remedies. If we see some disparities, we don't have to exhaust them, but we need to have seriously considered them, which we will do in terms of seeing what we think will work in terms of bridging the gap between any disparities we've seen. Next slide. So you all can be involved by being here today, and we again thank you. Can't thank you enough for being here. Completing the survey when you get it, participating in an interview or a focus group if you're contacted, and attending a public hearing. You can keep up with this study. We have a website that is live now, Gwinnett County Disparity Study.com, and also the email address. And I think that Cordelia, if she hasn't already, will put that in the chat room. Gwinnett County Disparity Study.com is the website. Events will be posted there, more information about us, more information about the study. And then Gwinnett County Study at gspclaw.com is the dedicated email. Cordelia checks that regularly and will respond to you. Next slide. And this is our timeline. We started this study in the spring, late spring, and we are in the process of collecting data now. Again, beginning our anecdotal process. Interviews are beginning. We'll be launching the survey, I think, in a couple of months. Completing the interviews. We'll be having the public hearings. And then in the winter, we'll be hunkered down trying to finish our data analysis that Christian will be working on, and our findings and recommendations. And probably late spring, early summer, we'll complete it and hand in the study and be doing presentations of this report. Okay. So here are all the ways you can connect with us. We are on LinkedIn. We do have a GSPC, gspclaw.com is our general website. We are on Facebook, and of course the dedicated email and the website. Okay, that's the presentation. I'm open now for questions, any that I didn't answer along the way. And if you just raise your hand, if you have that hand raise thing, the hand raise tool, or if you can't find that, if you want to raise your hand like this, I'll recognize you and you can unmute and ask your question. If you are on by phone, the question, after I've gotten the other questions, I will ask you to unmute and ask your question. Okay. Do I see anyone with their hand raised? Did I answer all of your questions?
Yes.
Okay, if someone has not, oh, Brian Smith, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, can everybody hear me? Michelle, can you
Hear you.
Okay, good. I have a question to ask, and I'm sure there'll be subsequent questions today to be asked. I'm a civil engineer. We do transportation services, and we are a DBE in the state of Georgia, as well as an MBE. As of today, we've yet to see anything come out of Gwinnett County, unfortunately. What we're seeing in the RFPs in terms of professional services for engineering services, this is important, take note of this. We're seeing best faith efforts, and that's the paragraph that's typically used in most states throughout the Southeast. Unfortunately, best faith efforts aren't getting us into the market. We're not seeing any DBE or MBE percentages being placed with pre-construction or design services type work. In terms of what you do at Griffin and Strong, are you keeping up with the company's NIAX codes and comparing the NIAX codes to the amount of work that's being disseminated by the county over the past 5 years? Or are you doing something different? That's my first question, I guess I should say. Sorry.
Yeah, so I showed you the way that we do availability, and that there are two ways. One is looking at the larger categories, which quite frankly, A&E is not a big category all by itself. But yeah, within that, one of the analysis we're doing is with Dun & Bradstreet, which is by, as you call it, NIAX code. I never know how to, I call it NAICS codes or NAICS codes, however you say it. Yes, though we'll be looking at utilization that way, which is looking how that has broken down by ethnicity and gender, as well as the other groups, LGBTQ, small businesses. And that's important, I know, because particularly with those kinds of construction related professional services, You hire an engineering firm, and then the only way to get in sometimes is to get in as a sub in order to get your foot in the door so that you can become a prime. And then there's maybe very little subcontracting there. So yeah, we will have a particular eye out on construction related professional services like engineering.
I understand. And that's very important to us because over here at Smith Engineering, like I said, we're not being utilized. And so, when we're talking about stuff like that, that's a key priority for us. And that's one of the reasons we haven't put in on anything in terms of working with Gwinnett County is because, I mean, yeah, we can sit here and call up HNTB, HDR, and all the big boys all day, but they're typically doing all the work for themselves. And if they don't have to use a sub, they're not going to. And everybody says, well, Mr. Smith, capacity is an issue. Well, if capacity is such an issue, why aren't you reaching out to us? But in the end, and I don't want to sound like a bad person here, the companies like HNTB, HDR, and so forth, Parsons have no reason to bring us on as a subcontractor when they're putting out as much as 1,100, 1,800 requisitions for staff. It behooves them to do the same thing that I'm doing and just try to hire internally or externally because they can put a 3, 2, or 3 multiplier with them and cut us out the market. It's not until Gwinnett and other counties, tighten up the reins and say, hey, look, we're using federal money. We have to utilize DBEs and NBEs. But it just seems like that whole last part of utilization of federal discretionary money and putting percentages with it for our utilization is totally being overlooked. I mean, and that's how we feel. And then that's why we haven't put in on anything as of today. I'll yield the floor. Sorry, I'm taking up too much time.
That's fine. Let me just clarify one thing though. Our study will not include federally funded projects where, for example, the DBE, because once you use kind of $1 of federal dollars, then the DBE program, unless it's grants, the DBE program is going to kick in. And
That's
so
correct.
what we recommend would not affect that. So we're looking at where there, in essence, are state and local dollars.
My apologies.
Okay, anyone else? Angela Kudger said this is much of the same for healthcare and technology. Some agencies are specific in only using larger companies and require minorities to become subcontractors first. This has been my experience with federal contracting. I stepped away as well. I don't know if you're still on, but I don't know if you want to add to that comment. Again, is this true with state and local dollars? Again, our study will not be including federal dollars. So yes, Stacy. Okay, Stacy, I'm sorry about your last name, Berezer. So Gwinnett County hired your firm to conduct this disparity study. Yes, they did. We bid on it. It was a public solicitation. We were one of the bidders, and we were lucky enough to win the bid. Consuelo Wilds Lewis, I see your hand up. You want to unmute?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm in the healthcare. I'm a mental health professional. I do clinical psychotherapy, crisis trauma and addictions, and I definitely understand everything that Brian is saying, and I definitely understand everything that Angela is saying. And what I have done, and what I'm in the middle of doing, is have literally have someone to walk me through these doors, because I hear from my colleagues who are minorities, even with subcontracting, the same things that Brian and Angela are talking about, no matter if it's healthcare or if in any industry, when it comes down to minorities coming into this door, is getting in the door and doing the applications and all that stuff is fine, is when you know that they need your help, but for whatever reason, they're being hired to do other things. They're hired in-house or whatever it is, and they're still taking these dollars, state dollars or federal dollars, but we're not talking about federal dollars, so we're going to talk about state dollars. They're still doing that, and it's discouraging. It's not I'm a type of person that I learn from other people. I see you not getting it, and I look at it and see that you're not you're not being helped, and I go through that same door and I'm hitting the same places, and you're not getting it. So if you're not going to be helped, then I know I'm not going to be helped. So there's no reason for me to go in that door without some type of ammunition before I go in that door. And if you are a minority small business owner, to go in that door with someone to help you go through that door, it costs a lot of money to have someone to help you in that arena. And it just costs a lot of money to do that. And when I say that, I'm saying that for me to have someone to walk me through these doors, I'm paying someone right now to help I'm paying an agency to help me get in this door. And it's not, and I'm a veteran. I am a veteran. I'm a small business owner. I'm a veteran. And I've done all those. I have every letter underneath the earth to say that I need help. Like, I'm a disabled small business woman, veteran, all those nomenclatures go underneath that, my name. And I'm seeing people not being helped. So, and I have to pay another agency to help me, pay someone to help me get through these doors. It's not as simple as it seems when you feeling that. And I hate the Small Business Association. And I hope someone is on here, because it sucks. It does not help any parts for any of that. I have to fill out an application to get to the application, to get to the application, to get to the meeting, to have the other part answered, the first question answered, then go back to say, oh, that you're not ready for this part, but you show them this part, and then they say, come back for this, and you got to fill out another application to stay in line to get the contract, to go to different counties and fill out this application to go here, and then you got to wait another 4 to 6 months, and then it go back to question number 1 8 months later. This is not the right answer.
Okay. All right, I hear you. I hear you saying a couple of things, and that last thing you're saying is that the paperwork is too burdensome and is difficult. And so we will note all of those comments. Someone asked me in the chat room whether we in fact have subcontractors on our contract. We do. We have 3. One firm who is assisting us with policy, one firm who is conducting the survey of business owners, and another firm who is doing interviews for us. So we do have 3 subcontractors on this contract with us. And we actually are a small minority and woman-owned firm based in Atlanta. Raven Williams, you have your hand up. You can.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am sure you are not the person to air our concerns to, so that part I will not do. But there obviously seems to be some sort of disparity. And I think the most interesting part is, unlike other local municipalities or cities or counties, there doesn't seem to be a balancing act in that there are numbers that most counties have to hit. Like with Fulton County, if you're working for the airport or you're working for the city, there's a certain amount of minority participation that has to happen. And so I guess my question is, because I do not do business in Gwinnett County, are those in place, and are those a part of the measuring stick that you will be using?
So we're actually creating that. The reason that Fulton County and City of Atlanta have some sort of measuring stick is because they have previously conducted studies and have those measuring rods. It's been quite a while since Gwinnett's done a study, and any study it did, any study you've done more than 5 to 10 years ago is going to be stale anyway. And theirs has been longer than that. So City of Atlanta has a race and gender conscious program based on its last disparity study. Fulton County actually has a race and gender neutral program, but they still have benchmarks. So that's what we're actually creating, is those benchmarks that they can measure their own performance under for all of these study groups. Thank you, Christian, for reminding me. I apparently skipped someone's comment. Eric Heflin, I'm a nonprofit in Riverdale providing social services, but we mostly pursue grants. Would there be any opportunities to do business with Gwinnett contractually? I don't know the answer to that. That's something you would have to reach out to the county directly. But my sense is, yeah, that not-for-profits. Our study does not include not-for-profits. And the reason it doesn't include not-for-profits is because not-for-profits don't have an ownership. I can't say it's African-American owned or Native American owned or non-minority owned. They don't have an ownership, so they're not part of our study. But when we look at firms who get awards from the county, that includes not-for-profits. So I think you have to see whether the type of work and the services you offer are the kinds of services that the county is purchasing. If so, there's nothing that would prevent you from trying to do business with them. Ray Cobb, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, 3 quick points. I just wanted to echo the lady that talked about the discouraging aspect to it. I know one thing, I attended the fair just maybe a month or so ago that Gwinnett County had. And, so, we do signs. And when I went to talk to the folks there, the first, and this is hard to capture in this process, but, I said, hey, I'm here to talk about signs. And the guy there told me, we do all of our signs in-house, so there's nothing here for you. And then when I told him, hey, you guys actually have annual contracts, and I'm working on a bid right now that's to produce it outside. He had difficulty responding to that. So the discouragement starts right from the beginning, and it was present at that fair. The other part of it that's a little bit discouraging, on the original, that bid got reissued again, but the first time they put it out, they had a local firm, engineering firm, get the contract to do the designs for the sign. They paid them, and then the people bidding on it, we had to then pay them $50 to get a copy of the design. And so when she talked about the cost associated with it, that's something very, very true and very real. And then of course you have to do your bonding and all that stuff to actually apply. And one thing I can say too, I've gotten most of my business outside of Gwinnett County. And the thing I noticed that there are the same companies in Gwinnett, but behave very differently inside of 285. So I think the study makes sure that there are 2 separate different behaviors depending on where the GC is operating. And so that's what I'm finding. So those 3 things: the behavior, the in-person kind of information that they're giving out, and just the cost associated with it. Some giving a vendor, they pay money just to get a copy of the information.
So when you say behavior inside or outside, I'm assuming of the perimeter, tell me what you mean. Clarify that for me. You mean the behavior of the...
They're actually seeking out subcontractors inside of 285. Yeah, as soon as you go inside, oh yeah, hey, in Gwinnett County, that same company And those names will become apparent as you guys do the study. We'll have different behaviors inside Gwinnett County.
All right, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yes, is it okay? I like to share. So I am a general contractor, based in Lawrenceville, and I started my company about 3 years ago. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't necessarily, looking to be just tagged as a minority contractor. I just wanted to, be a great contractor, but as I discovered, in the market, the construction industry and relationships are very, very deep rooted. And in some cases, and that's private and government, but in some cases, if you don't have that minority certification, you are ignored. You're invisible. When you do have it and it's a requirement on a project, you get the attention, you get the introduction, you get a chance to talk about your company, what you're doing, and get a chance to be taken seriously. When I first found out that Gwinnett County didn't have a minority, a percentage requirement, when I first found that out, I was blown away. Like I just couldn't believe it and couldn't understand why they don't have it. And as everyone knows, I mean, one of the things, that I found just in having my business, you got to have stamina to stay out here, survive, build the relationships, and that takes time. And having that minority participation in place, it does create an introduction to display what you can do, your company, where in some cases you might not have that opportunity, or you might end up being, a contractor that's, two guys in a truck, and you're not able to grow because you're not getting an opportunity or in the room to be able to get the size jobs that you need in order to build your company, increase your bonding, hire staff, and actually be able to go after bigger projects. If there was a contract that I did get in Gwinnett, in Clayton County, as a minority, being a part of a project, and I'll be honest with you, if I didn't get that job, I might have been closing my doors. To be honest with you, just because, it takes time. If you don't have the capital built up and understand how the bonding process works, you can't go after those opportunities. And if you stay at a certain level, you're never making the money. So in my experience, I believe that it's necessary. I believe it's necessary. You need it in order to break down some of these barriers that do exist in the construction arena, in the real estate industry. I don't know about some of the others, but in the construction industry, I know on the commercial side of things, you need that in order to, to survive, to get opportunities, to grow, to build, and, stand on your own. It's a tough situation, to be honest with you.
Well, so I heard a bunch of things in there, but one thing I want you to tell me a little bit more about is bonding. You mentioned bonding. Has that been an issue for you, or because you talked about getting capital and bonding? Is that an issue? I just wanted to get a little clarification there.
Yeah. The bonding is huge. It's probably one of the biggest barriers to do government and county, city projects. If you're not able to bond a project, you can't bid on it, right? So the bonding companies, they they review your credit, they review your access to capital, savings, line of credit, loans, whatever you have in place in order to operate as a company. So they review all of that, and if you're not at a certain place within with your finances and loans and lines of credit, if you're not there, then you can't participate. It's a closed door. You can't get in. You can't even bid on the government jobs without it. So how do you build your bonding, right? How you build your bonding if some of the opportunities can be far and few in between that actually yield real cash flow to operate, and the opportunities are, there's barriers to getting those opportunities. So, some people may never, as a general contractor or a subcontractor, whatever, if you can't bond, you can't do the larger contracts that actually allow you to build and to grow and to, build and grow your company and operate, is what I'm trying to share.
He's absolutely right. And there are different counties who, Clayton County, which was Alan was talking about, and he is a colleague. I do know who he is. There are different counties who make it available to have a stepping stone, meaning that they have smaller contracts that may not require a bond, which Gwinnett does not have. All contracts require a bond. Therefore, you're not able to show your value. You're not able to show your ability nor your skill set that your company has to offer. So having some type of stepping stone for everybody, that's not just general contractors, that is anybody in the medical profession, that's anybody in the entertainment profession, because all of those are available on the website. But if you don't possess what is necessary in terms of bonding to gain access, then it's another shut door. And the larger companies already have that bonding because they have the funding and they have the credit and they have the experience. But if you're not allowing entry, you never are allowed to have any of those.
Exactly. So even if I have the expertise, the skills, I could build a project better than anybody else. I have if you have the skills, you don't even get a chance to demonstrate or to perform and actually have an opportunity to build capital so you can grow your bonding. When you're going for a bond, I mean, it's just like, buying a house. I mean, they underwrite you the same way. And a lot of a lot of people don't have that capital that's just set aside, or enough to where you can build and grow your company. So you're at a stopping point. Like you're not going anywhere as far as government contracting if you don't have a bonding company that is supporting you and stuff like that. And I know the SBA has something out there that kind of helps out, but you still go through that same underwriting process, which can be challenging for an average below the average person in their finances. If you take an average person with their finances, they're not going to get in. But if you got to be exceptional, but even being exceptional in your finances, they're still not going to get it if you don't have $100,000 in the bank in order to do $1 million project, which is not gonna make you rich. $1 million project, just one, is not gonna do it. But I mean, there's some substantial capital that has to be parked to be able to do $1 million, a $5 million project, a 10 million, like it's substantial capital. It's almost like 10% of the project cost almost in order to be able to get bonded to do that particular type of job.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carter. That's been very good information. I have a couple of things in the chat room I want to get to. Are you encouraging participants to pursue business with Gwinnett County during the study? Yes, absolutely. Our study should not hold anybody back. The fact that we're in the middle of the study from pursuing those opportunities. I hope there are wonderful opportunities for all of you. Let's see what else I see here.
I have my hand up, Marie Lupo, but I'm not sure if I did it right.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was just trying to get some of these in the chat room.
Okay.
'Cause they're-
I'm just want to be clear. So
Go ahead.
this is going to be a study, so that y'all could start giving money to different industries that's disadvantaged in some type of way.
No, that's not our study. What our study is to determine whether there is an inference of discrimination based on it would be the current effects of past discrimination that have affected the access to getting contracts through the procurement process with Gwinnett County.
Okay.
That is the primary goal of our study, to see whether there is a factual predicate for race and gender conscious programs. That's one part of it. The other is whether there are disparities in some of the race and gender neutral groups, like even though it's not a race and gender, it's not a discriminatory issue, but whether there are disparities still with LGBTQ, veterans, small businesses,
Why are you doing it?
disabled businesses.
What are you doing?
That's part of our, so that's our job. Our job is not to give out money or to give out contracts. That's the county's job. But what we're trying to do is make sure there's a level playing field for everybody, and help the county out of, if we see those disparities, give the county some recommendations on how their policies and their procedures could be more inclusive.
Okay, got it. I understand.
I see a few more questions. The opportunities are, and then I think there are a couple before that. Someone made the statement that the insurance requirements for some of these contracts are shocking. Taking into account insurance is at an all-time high. Yes, this recording will be available on the website after this is over. The opportunities are far-reaching for small businesses, as it's as though by design. Another person said, that's the word I'm looking for, too much barriers in the procurement process. It's ironic that true small businesses are almost already disqualified based on all the requirements of an RFP. And then someone else said, because they want to base contracts on relationships instead of expertise. Someone else said, unfortunately, that relationship element is implicit, but a huge factor, and it happens across all levels. At the end of the day, a human is deciding who wins the bid. Again, someone else said regarding SBA, I was recently told that registering in a different state may yield better results, that the local offices in GA have had many transitions. I have colleagues that have moved their headquarters to other states based on the contracting and SBA contracts suggestions. Again, our study is not of federal contracts. Solicitations appears predestined. Everything else is just a formality and or legality. My opinion, you are discriminating against, or you're discriminated against for lacking. I think that's everything that I covered in the website. On the chat room. Brian Smith, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Michelle. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to encourage everybody in this chat group is hang in there. I mean, you know, there's always going to be some obstacle to prevent you or try to hinder you from going after a proposal or RFP or whatever. I know that many of you, and again, I'm talking from an engineering design point, but some of you are in construction business. This is an all-time high for construction, especially in Metro Atlanta. There's no reason for you not to be able to get work, but I will put this caveat out there from a design perspective. Many of us need to start joint venturing. Let me say it again, joint venturing. So we need to team up with other DBEs, MBE firms in order to make a bigger presence so that other large prime firms will pay attention to us. Because if we're a 1 or 2 man outfit, we're typically not getting looked at. So those are some just suggestions I have. The other thing is, like I said, hang in there, because these bigger companies that are always getting the Gwinnett contracts, they ain't getting it done in a timely fashion. And somebody will say, oh, well, how do you know that? Well, I can tell you from a design perspective on the AEC side, I've got friends that are 5, 10 years younger than me that are senior VPs. They're already telling clients such as Gwinnett and others and Cobb, hey, look, you hire us, it's a 3 to 4 month delay on getting your stuff done. I'm not going to name the firm's names, but I know it's going on. So you need to hang in there. Keep your prices where they are, because eventually they're going to have to use you just based off sheer capacity. So that's it. That's my 10 cents. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? We're a little over time, but as long as we continue to have some good comments and questions, we'll keep going for a little while longer if there's anything else. Okay. All right, well, this was a very good discussion. I think we got a lot of good things out on the table. We'll keep this going. There are so many more opportunities for you all to participate and to ask others to participate as we move forward. So we hope that this is not the last time you join us, but that you keep joining us for all of these events. They'll be posted on the website. All of you will be getting invitations because you're now on our lists if you weren't on before. So we look forward to keeping the dialogue going. And again, thank you all for joining us today. And if there's nothing else, we're going to go on and close out.
Thank you for being an excellent moderator.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.